Today, we are honored to have our very own trailblazer, educator Annie Munn, who will share her living history with us.
This says, I am Black history. And so I don't take up all your time. I know you got a game coming. I wrote down what I wanted to say. Also, if you watch the Jumbotron, I'm only going to tell you what's on that. So let's start. Number one, please. Oh, boy. This is a picture of my mom and dad. It shows them standing in a dirt road outside our house after church. This road was made by wagon wheels, as this land belonged to the parents and others who raised crops such as corn, peas, along with chickens and hogs, and a horse for ploughing. Across from those fields, if you look behind them, you might be able to recognize some houses. That's where the city of Sylacauga ended. We were there, but we were not considered a part of the city. Across those fields, the houses belonged to white people in Sylacauga, Alabama. Our addresses were routing numbers since we were not officially a part of the city. Number two, please. In this house, this very house, I think most of you know what a shotgun house looks like. My parents added 2 more rooms. In this house, our parents raised 7 of their living children, having lost the first son and the last daughter at childbirth. It was a shotgun house with 2 rooms added for a bedroom for parents and 1 for the children. 1 room consisted of bunk beds on the walls, 1 side for the boys, 1 side for the girls. On the other half of that house was the kitchen, eating room, living room for company. My sister Bertha married at 17, like my mother did, and moved out to live with her husband on their ranch. I was 8 years old when she left, and these 3 older brothers left me to do a lot of the things. Farm life was hard, with never-ending chores, hauling water, tending animals, feeding chickens, gathering the eggs, all done before leaving for school. I loved school, and I soaked up everything they had to offer. Next, look at my house. Go back one, look at my house. You have to know this is where I lived. Okay, next picture. These are probably not in order, but it's okay. Let me see if I can catch up with what's up there. What these 3 pictures are showing is after I finished school, and so I am hoping that they can go back to where I am in school. That'll do. That'll do. What they should have been showing on number 3 was a picture of me from my high school yearbook. So I'm going to jump ahead down there. My brother Willie, who was 2 years older than I, went to school. I was sent with him because my mom didn't have anybody to keep me. She had to go to the fields and she had to go work. So I went with him. By the time my mom was able to get a birth certificate for me, I could do the 2nd grade work that my brother was doing because I did it neatly and he let me do it. And by the time she got a birth certificate for me, I should have been in kindergarten or first grade, but I was already doing second grade work, so they let me stay there. All my teachers were, in elementary school were black females, and they poured everything they knew and everything they could find out into us. And they told us every day that an education was the only way to escape our farm life. I was the first one to graduate in my family. One brother, I need to clarify this, one brother volunteered for the Army. I found out later. See, there I am. I wanted you to see that I was cute when I was in high school. Okay. Although I was the first person to graduate from my high school, from my family, I had 3 brothers. One went to the Army, one got married to his high school girlfriend, and the other, Willie, the one who let me do his work, he joined the Air Force. What I didn't know was as soon as they got out of that house, they sent money back. My mama was able, because now they decided to give us electricity, because the city was moving out to us and we had to be accommodated. So my oldest brother, James, sent money back to buy her a refrigerator. Thank God I had no longer to pull that pan from under that ice box. You know. That second brother, although he was married and living in Cleveland, he sent back money to get what Daddy had found was an electric stove. And my daddy could fix anything. So he did that. The last brother, Willie, who went to the Air Force, and he sent back materials to help shore up the house. I didn't know all of that. What I knew was they just ran out and didn't go to finish school. You know. Now, to me, this picture shows you a person who received a 4-year, all-paid college education to Talladega College. Now, I point this out because I'm sure the man is gone, but a Dr. T.K. Lawless, who was an alumnus of Talladega, he was living in Chicago. He was a plastic surgeon, and he searched all over for black high school students who showed potential. And each year, he chose 10. So my teachers, now I'm in high school, they pushed us. And like I say, I loved education, so I didn't bother. Anything they wanted me to do, I did it. I love PE because I could take a shower, you know. I was one of the 10 who showed capability of learning a higher education. And so while I was at Talladega for 4 years, I met Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King wasn't the famous man that he ended up being, but he was famous to us. When I was in college, there was I think you remember the bus? And he was instrumental in that. But what he was doing at my college, he was a speaker at the baccalaureate service when I was a junior at Talladega. And so I met this man and shook his hand, and I did not know how famous he was going to become, but he was precious to us. Number 4, please. I'll go on because I don't know if it should be a picture of me, see up in the top. It should be a picture of me standing in that same dirt road that you saw Mom and Dad on. Time has gone by. While I was at that college, they knew that every Talladega graduate could be placed. They didn't have to worry about it because if you didn't make an A or B, you were out of there, you know. So the year that I graduated from college, I'm standing in the same road that my mom and dad were standing in when I took that picture. I got hired by a Talladega alumnus named Mr. Pendergrass because he was setting up a school for black children in Columbia, South Carolina, and he knew that if he came back to his alma mater, he would just walk out with the teachers and not have to worry about them. So 4 of us followed him to South Carolina. However, I only stayed there for 1 year because my honey asked me to marry him. My fiance, who graduated with me, went to the Air Force. And so the 4 years that I was in college, he was moving, well, he wasn't moving too much in grade-wise, but he finished his first 4 years. He wrote my dad, asked permission to marry me, sent the rings to them, and my mama let me have the engagement ring, which is now over 60 years old. And so, on to our wedding. I came back home after working 1 year, and I need to back up. Remember the things that the boys got, Mama? She asked me, I asked her, what do you want? She said, they have put in a sewage. I want a toilet. I want an inside toilet. So that's what I did. For the months that I was there, I sent home $50 every month. And when I went home to get married, my mama had an indoor toilet. Our wedding, the house behind you, belonged to my husband's mom and dad. They were caught up in the same thing, having to sell their houses and move somewhere else because the city was moving out. So we're getting married right in front of in their yard. After the wedding, I moved to Columbus, Ohio. I didn't teach in Columbus after receiving a license because I got pregnant. And I released the job to the other teacher. They gave me 4 months severance fee, 4 months to walk away from the job because 2 things. My husband was in the military and they couldn't be sure I was going to stay there the whole time. And secondly, you know, they didn't know. And besides, would you turn down 4 months pay and you don't have to work? You know. Okay, moving right along. This is where where God steps in, and you gotta watch the doors open. My husband received orders to Germany, and they needed the baby, and I went home to Alabama to wait for him to get housing. And I ended up teaching at the very school where I went. The teacher had let me just read it. I'm getting off. She had been my history and language arts teacher, and she was recuperating from an illness. So they asked me to finish the school year out for her. And can you imagine that I taught my own brother-in-law and my baby sister? And they had to call me Mrs. Munn. But when Lee got housing, and we arrived in Germany in 1963, my husband took with him my resume. I had taught 1 full year, I had taught 1/2 year, I even had Ohio license, so I had South Carolina, Alabama, and Ohio license, right? In Germany, the DOD, the Department of Defense, was looking for 5,000 teachers. So when I got there, and he made sure I got there by August, they hired me sight unseen. They didn't even know who I was. I had credentials, you know. When Mr. Bale, my principal, some names you remember because of the people. Like I say, he hired me, and he gave me a 5th grade class, and this is where it gets interesting. My husband's commanding officer's son was in my class. If you're the only black teacher out of 50 instructors at a school and you have the commanding officer's son, I dotted every I, crossed every T, as the saying going, and I earned a reputation for pushing and pulling those students to their highest potential. That's how I was taught in school. Needless to say, I was given great evaluations each of those 3 years. Fast forward, we're back in the States. We are in Victorville, California at George Air Force Base. It's 1996, and my husband goes and turns in my credentials. And I was told that there were no openings at the brand new Shepherd School on base. So I started substituting. I wanted to be a part of it. And guess what? When Burlingame got my paperwork, they asked, why is this person substituting with all these credentials, and you have people who are working on a BA credential, working full time? I ended up, well, of course, they said to me, we have to offer you a position. Now, if you don't want it, you're going to have to put it in writing, because, wouldn't I want it, you know? So I ended up teaching, and if you look at those pictures, look at them carefully. There's only one, that's me, and that's my class. For 3 years, I worked at Shepherd School, and I was the only black teacher there. It was my responsibility to do the job the best I knew how, because if there ever was another black teacher, they had to use me as an example, as the guide. I also, and later on you'll see another picture, the staff. There was an entire staff. I'm talking principal, secretary, everybody. I was still the only black person at Shepherd School. And remember, God steps in. And he gave, the door had to open, and they had to give me a job. Okay, I worked there in 67, 68, and 69. I didn't work in 70 because I had been waiting for a second child, and I got pregnant. You know. During the same time, my husband was sent to Vietnam, and we had to move off base, because when you go to Vietnam, there's no guarantee you're coming back. He took us home to Alabama, so that we could say goodbye to the family. Now, we had to buy our first home. Put the next one up. These are my classes at Shepherd School. And number 7 should show you the house that we bought. There you go. We had to buy a house because the rents in Tatum Plaza, and Tatum Plaza is still in Victorville, they jacked them up so high, and the man showing us around kept saying, you two don't know that they're asking for 3 times what people used to pay? They don't want you here. If you can afford that kind of rent, why don't you buy a house? So we bought this house. And Lee ended up in Vietnam, and obviously he came back okay. Now, the next few pictures was showing, number 8 and number 9, was showing the classes at Shepherd School on George Air Force Base. I worked there from 67 to 9. And guess what? When Lee got back from Vietnam, he was here for 18 months, and then he was assigned to Guam, USA. I tell you, God is good. I went to Chapman College and was trying to complete my master's degree so I could move across the pay scale when I was at Shepherd. I was faced with, but when I went off to Guam, oh, by the way, Lee got the job in Guam, and he put me on the housing list, and off we went to Guam. And when I got there, guess what? I ended up teaching in dependent children in Guam for 3 years. But God, you know, there was an expectation that, anyway, I'm gonna move on. George Air Force, you jumped ahead. I'm retired on that one, so you have to go back. George Air Force Base sent their children who were over 6 years old, sixth grade, downtown. But there's an expectation of those kids who are going to be here 18 months to 2 years that they get the best education they can. So I was hired at Hook Junior High in 1976 due to my experience in Germany and Guam with military families. While I was there, I started a reading lab. And we had a reading lab because they canceled all the electives for junior high, and those rooms were not used. But I need to tell you, when I had started my master's at Chapman College before I went to Guam, and when I got back, it had become a master's in administration. And so I finished it because I thought I could still use the hours. They said, no, you can't move across the scale with a master's in administration. You have to start all over again. So I went back. I started a master's in reading at Azusa Pacific. And when I got no job when I got back, in the elementary school, I went to Hook. And that's when the dependents from the base were coming down. And they were a little concerned about what the expectations are going to be. So I was hired due to my experience with the children in Guam in Germany and Guam. And I started a reading lab because a lot of the kids coming from Victorville schools were not up to par in reading. So I asked them to make the wood shops and those things into a reading lab. And I kept that going with the help of some very wonderful teachers for about 6 years, and then they asked me to be a mentor to help the new teachers. We were hiring people, and they were turning around and leaving. So I was a mentor, and I ended up with another job because I stole an idea from San Diego. San Diego had what they call a new teachers coordinator position. And what it was, you had to leave your job, work with the teachers, the new teachers, until they stayed, so they wouldn't leave. I applied for the job, and for 5 years, I was a new teacher coordinator at Victor Valley Union High School. And this is a picture of us on our way. We're going to go to Guam, and we have to say goodbye to his people. And so my 6-month-old baby and my 8-year-old daughter are in Alabama saying goodbye to our parents. Okay. After I became the new teacher coordinator, I held a position for 5 years until there was no more new teachers needed. And so they said, what are you going to do? We can see if we can find a place for you to go back to the classroom. And I said, I have a master's degree in administration. And so they hired me to go to Victor Valley Junior High, where they needed a new assistant principal. And guess who I met when I got there? Pastor David Denson Jr. This man had a child at that school, so he came down there and he sat knee to knee, hand to hand. He prayed with me, and he said, "Oh, just think, reason I was successful, you know. And you know, while I was there, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you. I'm going to walk away. Not only was I successful in that job, I knew that when I was young, school was the only thing that gave me my forward push. So I was responsible for safety and security of all the students. So I implemented a no suspension policy. I didn't care what you got in trouble for. You didn't get out of school. You didn't get to be at home. We called it BIC, back in control. Those students who were suspended from school activity were required to be there in school. Dropped off by their parents, fed some breakfast, had all their assignments sent to the big room, assignments from the regular teacher. And if the regular teacher didn't accept what they completed, you had another day in BIC. They were my class. I supervised them with a stern campus security who made them sit with their faces to the wall doing their work. And needless to say, not many students wanted BIC more than one time. And to end this, that picture that you showed you with all the babies in the house, I was so grateful for the doors that God opened for me. And I can't take credit. You and I know I was standing in the right place at the right time for the right service. I retired at 60. There we are. I retired at 60 years old, and I came here to work at Burning Bush, and I attended the birth of all my grandchildren. And I held that man to me because whatever happened here, he gave me orders. Well, if you see a need, I kept saying, we need the Tyler's church. He said, so do it, you know. And the rest is history. All of you who know me, you know whatever I did here is because he made me, okay? Thank you.